Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Video Shamanism. I'm your captain, Alex Lipton, and I'm here with the Sky Chairman, John Allen, and we will be talking about a very interesting subject for today. It is Halloween, of course, and we are dressed up, but not just because it's Halloween. This is just the way we are, I think. This kind of is a reflection of what the story we're about to tell is, and this show is going to be a little bit and a lot, and maybe not so much about the concept of aliens and what life on other planets or life on Earth and alien life's all about. So we're going to get into this in just a moment. But before we do, let me introduce the Sky Chairman, John Allen. How are you today, John?
I'm doing well, Captain. Thanks for having me on again. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's one of the things I think about the most, I think, other than day-to-day stuff. So I'm very excited to chat with you about, I think some of the best conversations we've ever had are about aliens or extraterrestrials. So hopefully we can continue that.
I think so. I think so, man. Yeah, I was just, as you were saying that, I was wondering myself, like, what was the iconic beginning for our friendship in talking about aliens and connecting about that? Because obviously 9/11 was a big part of that, but that wasn't like inherent with aliens were not inherent within the 9/11 dialogue as we first started talking. That eventually I kind of came full circle and saw that there was some crazy connection to that. But I'm wondering what that was. I mean, I have some ideas, but do you have any like thoughts off the top of your head about that?
I do remember that it wasn't until I lived in the house, at least thinking about how I thought and when I thought and what I thought about extraterrestrials. It didn't happen in the dorms for me. That was 9/11, like you said, and other stuff like that. But I really hadn't gone into the realm of aliens yet until we moved into the house. And I don't remember if this was the direct moment, but there was one of the first nights we moved in, there was a huge shooting star that like we all saw. Do you remember that?
Yeah, was it like some of us were in the backyard and then we were in like Chris's room and Kitty was there?
Yeah. There was like, we had 2 or 3 different angles on it. Like I feel like Kitty was in Chris's room in the beginning because she was looking through to the front, towards the front of the house. That's where it came. And some of us were in the backyard. And then, that might have, we at least saw it from multiple vantage points, and it was very big and very bright. And it was a shooting star. I don't think there was any question about that. It didn't look suspicious, but it was just so big and bright and in the sky. And like within a week of us moving in, I feel like that might have been a little seed for me to start like thinking about that kind of stuff. I don't remember. Somebody must have said something. I'm sure we talked about stuff, but I hadn't really gone, the way that I had gone down the 9/11 conspiracy, not trusting the government, that kind of stuff, not trusting the official story about life and how life goes. I hadn't gotten to that point about aliens and thinking like, wait a minute, if I don't think they're telling the truth about this, then maybe they're not telling the truth about that. And that's very interesting to me. And then, David Wilcock and a bunch of other stuff, Roswell and all that stuff kind of, spiraled us into talking about aliens. So that became a big theme for me. But I feel like that shooting star might have just been a little, hey, think about this now.
Yeah. And that was a very synchronic event, I remember, because, like we were different vantage points, like you were saying. I remember being in Chris's room. I think Chris wasn't even there at that point. We were in Chris's room, and I remember with Kitty, and she went over to the glass sliding door with the thing, and she, within this moment, she like went over, opened it, looked out, and she goes, "Oh, a UFO." And I remember thinking like, oh, like, that's Kitty. She might have just said that, but like, it was just the timing of that. She just walked over like, oh, there's a UFO. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But then we went back and like in the kitchen, you guys came in like, guys, did you see that? Like you guys were in the back or somewhere else and saw so we saw the same thing. And that was a little, just a great little initiating synchronicity about all this. Because I think, ultimately synchronicity is something that helps us understand what the whole alien concept means and helping us understand it, because it's not necessarily just physical beings coming to Earth like in the science fiction sense. There's like a whole wider variety of these types of experiences. And I think for me, I never really, like, I didn't not believe in aliens, but I was never really into aliens in the way that I eventually became. Like, when I feel like when we started really dialoguing after that point, that's when like, aliens became, like, more of a thing for me. But I remember moving to California, and one of the first times I was in my house I'm in now, and I was using Google Earth back in the early days of Google Earth, and I was just, like, looking up random shit. And I remember trying to find Area 51. I found a YouTube video of that guy, Bob Lazar, who supposedly worked at Area 51 and was involved in back engineering the crashed UFOs that were there. So he, in this interview, gives a location of where Area 51 was. So I'm in my bed, and I got my Google Earth on my computer. I'm like, oh, all right, I'm going to find Area 51. And based on just the coordinates or the map, if you will, I was able to find Area 51 on Google Earth. And that was like a big eye opener for me, even before like probably before and during the 9/11 thing. It was just kind of like, holy shit, there it is. There it fucking is right there. And you could see it. That just kind of opened the big time open possibility. Like, okay, there's something going on here. And it's a rabbit hole that it's going to be delved down into.
Yeah, yeah, that's seeing something like that, because it was such a legend and a myth at that time, or to everybody, you know, especially in the UFO community or whatever. But then seeing it, yeah, like it's right there on Google Maps. It wasn't like a picture of something else. It was like you actually going personally on Google Maps and seeing it. So that's encouraging. But then we later learned that they said that base is abandoned, right, and it's somewhere else, and it was never there. And who knows what was true and whatnot. But yeah, I don't really remember if I had a specific like video or something that I saw or something that I heard that was kind of mind-boggling or kind of opened up my mind. But I do remember eventually, like the aspect that I got into mostly about extraterrestrials was the idea. I forget the woman's name. She was an older woman who just talked about the souls, kind of the waves of souls incarnating on Earth that were extraterrestrials. And that was a brand new idea for me. You know, I always thought about physical beings coming down and looking like the Greys and the scary people, and that was kind of all I really knew about aliens. But then learning that there's a whole different angle to it. Like, not only are there aliens here, but they are humans, but they're kind of on the inside. They, you know, they're undercover, basically under human cover, coming in and just learning about the idea of, you know, people from different civilizations literally incarnated here in human bodies, forgot about their past lives in order to help whatever's happening here. Like, that idea was so eye-opening for me, and that was kind of what set me down whatever that corridor of the ideas of extraterrestrials and government stuff. Obviously it gets a lot crazier the more you read into it, like learning about the Montauk Project and you know, Roswell, the Downcraft, and back in engineering and all that kind of stuff. But that stuff was always really cool. But learning about like souls incarnating and coming here in a completely different form was really cool to me. And I always wanted to write, you know, a script about it.
Yeah, wasn't the another thing that probably was initiating force, if you will, that brought it all together for us was that handbook for the new paradigm. This free book that we were like watching I forgot the name of that guy already, but he like
George Green.
George Green, yeah.
Right?
George Green, yeah. So he had this book that was free that you could order online, and it was in a pretty small book, but pretty and easy to read. But it was just literally what the name implies. It was a handbook for the new paradigm, and it explained a lot of these things from a matter of fact basis, not like, you know, even on Ancient Aliens today, they're like asking these questions, trying to like kind of work you up into the idea of being like, was it possible or could it be? This was just like, this is what's going on. This is happening. There's these levels, all of these different beings and souls and light workers and stuff like that. So I think that was another book or a time, and that book was like the catalyst for opening our perception of what the concept of aliens even is. Because yeah, it's science fiction, and historically it's literally just these extraterrestrial like beings that are not like us, that's very alien, like very strange and foreign to everything that we think we know. But then I think as we started to open up our minds about all this stuff, we started to see that it's not necessarily something completely foreign, but actually like absolutely fundamental and part of our entire history and who we really are. Because there are a lot of, like, I was into Atlantis and stuff like that way before all of this. And I remember even like back in New York years before getting into any of this shit, looking into a concept of what the Atlanteans were, looking into like, there's this missing link. We don't know how we got this super jump in our intelligence. Where'd that come from? And I remember reading something, it like blew my mind. I didn't deny it, but it was just really intriguing, was that the human ancestors were not necessarily monkeys, but there were like a hominid, like ape-like being that mated with these, like, in what I read, they were like what described as like the gods from India. They had like 6 arms and like a third eye, and they were like these etheric spiritual beings that mated with the early hominid ape people, and that's where we came from. I remember reading that back in the day, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, it seems like, you know, absolutely science fiction, but it almost opened up a doorway or planted a seed that, like, okay, something about who we are as we know it is alien in its own way. So that was like a really big thing, and that's kind of what it kind of evolved into over time.
Yeah, that's very an interesting kind of soft intro to it too. It gives you a connection. You know, it is part of you, but it is also is something else with that. And I feel like that's a better way to kind of introduce that to people. Not saying like, you are an alien, you come from somewhere else, or this person is an alien. It's just like, you are from here, you are of this, but there's something else that we don't know about in there. And I feel like that's a little bit more comfortable. And then it kind of, if you think about it, it's like, well, this is different and this is weird. And, you know, you can kind of, at least you and I could kind of let that into our matrix of ideas and kind of let us start to believe that, because it's a little bit more like, okay, that's not that extreme. It's kind of still out there, but that's a good way to start thinking about that. Maybe things aren't as the way they seem, and you aren't exactly the way that you seem or the way that you were told that you were.
Yeah, it's like our past is way more interesting than we've been programmed to believe or that we remember at all. And it's also part of who we are. It's not something that's coming eventually, like when they will come or have they come in recent past. Like, that's the thing too that I got fascinated with, was that this thing goes back thousands and thousands of years. And like, even to take it even to another quantum leap, thinking of it, what else could aliens be besides just little green men coming from Mars or something, was I think it was when we'd watch like Joe Rogan stuff, like back before Joe Rogan's podcast and everything. I remember he still talks about it today, but that aliens are not as much like physical beings, that aliens are like interdimensional beings that exist outside of time. Through psychedelic experiences, people have like involvement with these beings. So like the way that our brains work is just the way that we perceive the electromagnetic spectrum and everything. We have an expectation of what an alien should be, but it's like, well, maybe aliens are literally like these, like, how would an ant perceive a human being? We can walk around in much bigger space and have different time spectrums, like a macrocosm of another being. So it's again, it's just another one of these things that aliens are not necessarily just humanoid people from other planets that come here at different times, but there's something way more trippy than that involved with what aliens are.
Right, exactly. That seems to be the theme here, is that there's so much more going on, you know, that than we understand, or than what we are told, and that's just what we believe. And that's like the idea of alien. I think the idea of alien in like a community's perception of reality is like introducing just the word alien is like, okay, there is something outside of what we know, that is so different from what we know that we can't relate to it. This is why we call it alien. So I feel like that is just anything that you can label in this category is just something that we need to learn more about ourselves and more about the way that the world works. So the more that the alien word is out there, it's just kind of like, oh, there's so much more and it's so different, but the more we learn about alien, the less alien it becomes, which is why I think some people in the community are like, try to avoid using the word alien because it makes the separation, it creates a separation. It suggests that we can't understand each other and we're so different. But if you use like extraterrestrial, which is kind of a nice go-between, it's kind of more easily relatable and it's not so far away from you that you're that different and that you can't understand it, so I feel like we're getting to that point, especially with movies like with Alien, the original, and the perception of aliens then, and then we've talked about this, and then same director, James Cameron, making a movie Avatar, where all of a sudden the aliens are the good guys and they're the ones who are more human than the humans who are somehow now the evil ones. So
right.
I love the evolution of the idea of what alien is to our society. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's like exactly that subject as part of this thing when researching aliens over the years. For anyone who hasn't paid attention or even just researched aliens and in any of this stuff or government involvement with this, let's just say for the sake of the conversation, in the 20th century, there was some sort of like crash or intervention or like involvement with aliens that the government was aware of and tried to cover up. And a lot of people look at that as like the government's just this malevolent, like withholding, ego-based, like we don't want the people to know the truth, like Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. Like we tend to think of them like that. But if we look at an actual historical group that emerged right at the time of the Roswell crash at the end of World War II was Majestic 12. And if you can look them up, Majestic 12 is this group of, and it's not science fiction. A lot of people thought it was for a while, but it's actually declassified. It's a real group of people and a lineage of like a think tank of politicians, military people, thought leaders that, let's say for the sake of the conversation, were given the truth or given the evidence. Here, the aliens exist, but it's a subject that is so like, it's not just like, oh, there are these beings from another planet that are here. Even these guys were like, oh, fuck, there's like a whole Pandora's box right here, and we don't know what it means. We have, like, what's going to happen if the people find out the truth when we don't even know if the truth is? Like, what happens if this gets out? And there was the War of the Worlds, Orson Welles' experiment, where they planned it in such a way it seemed like an accident where everybody was supposed to watch or listen on the radio to a certain radio show, but that got canceled, or something happened midway through. So most of the people that were going to listen to that show suddenly had to change the channel. So they changed the channel, and then it's Orson Welles' War of the World radio show, but they missed the whole beginning disclaimer saying that this was just a fictional thing, that it was just a radio play. But they turn in about halfway into what sounds like an actual radio transmission from the local news, saying that aliens have invaded New Jersey and there's like crazy traffic, and people tune into this actually believing that aliens were coming in. So it caused an actual panic, and people were freaking out just on the concept of aliens coming in. What do we do? National emergency. Everybody, oh, I'm a dead sorry.
I didn't realize that was how it went down. I thought the idea was that they purposefully misled people as a test. And I didn't realize that they had like a disclaimer at the beginning or like a warning that most people missed. That's a part that I had not heard before. That makes a little more sense.
And that's kind of like on another subject that we've touched on before, of just the way that these Illuminati type people, even Freemasons, not necessarily evil, but just the way people with knowledge play the game, is that they have to tell you or show you what's going on no matter what. Like, they don't actually mislead us. They give us so much information, like almost in a way to deliberately confuse us, so that when we make the choice or we become afraid or we it's like we authorize the behavior. We're not actually being controlled by the government in such a way. Like, that's the big illusion. It's like we are authorizing the control And there's a whole other conversation, we get into that. But yeah, they made it clear, like, yes, this is fake, but they planned it in such a way so that no one would hear that. It was on the station, but no one was tuned in during that time. So then when people tune in like 10 minutes later and they think it's an alien invasion, this was supposedly part of the Majestic 12, testing the waters of the public consciousness. Okay, how would people react if this got out? And granted, they did it in a sort of manipulative way, but it was sort of genius. It showed that people were afraid. And this is not even having to do with aliens. It's just, it could be anything unknown. People fear the unknown. So that Majestic 12 was involved with this, taking this information, taking this awareness, and slowly integrating it into the public consciousness over like 50 to 100 years. So like, just like you said, you know, it's Alien, the beginning of the movie Alien, it's like, aliens, be afraid. It's completely scary. And now people are completely familiarized with aliens. And we actually, yeah, like Avatar, the aliens are actually the good guys in the situation. We're the ones that are fucked up. So yeah, there's definitely a huge effort to orient or prepare our consciousness for this inevitable disclosure, is what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hoping for, obviously. And we could paint that picture with what we've been given at this point. But, you know, just thinking of the idea that most people start with about aliens is a scary one, obviously, because it's alien. But then the image that we always get is the tiny white alien with the big head and the big black eyes, just like something that looks very intimidating, just very different to us. And it doesn't look friendly. It doesn't have, you know, you can't see the white, doesn't have any whites of its eyes. It just looks like scary to us, you know. And then hearing all the stories and the ideas about they came down and they probe people, they'd abduct people, they mutilate cows. Like, these are like what the layman knows about basically aliens. If you ask them about it, it's like, oh, little gray, the grays, and they come down and stick stuff up your butt. And it's because they made a pact with Eisenhower or somebody that they, you know, in order to trade for technology, they exchanged, they said there was a certain amount of percentage of people or whatever that they could come and experiment on, because the grays are us from the future, and their species is dying, and they need to come back to like find the thing within their genetics that helps them stay alive in the future. So they're prodding and poking us and doing experiments on us. And I feel like that is what most people think of aliens, and then Roswell. But we always just envision these scary little gray people that are nothing like us, except for they have, you know, they are humanoid. You know, they have arms and legs, but they're shorter and just shaped all weird and kind of scary. But I feel like that was kind of a metaphor and also literal for what the unknown to us, you know. So we humanize the unknown to something that we could at least take in an image and be like, okay, that's scary and that's different, but it's still kind of like us, but it's alien and it does bad things, and we can't, there's no reasoning, there's no communication, there's no cooperation or friendship here. It's like they're coming in to do bad things to us. And then it's the idea of it evolving and then us learning more about them, and then just the portrayal, obviously, because we're both movie buffs, like just how much they can portray about an idea, and how much they can influence people about what they think about certain ideas, especially a brand new idea like aliens. So they had a lot of control, to manipulate us and how we felt about these ideas. So it's good to see that we are evolving from just the straight up fear and they're going to come kill us, even though Stephen Hawking said if an extraterrestrial civilization comes here, we're in trouble, because they're probably just coming to mine our planet. Yeah. And they have no good intentions. But even though the smartest guy on the planet said that not too long ago, I feel like we are generally, even if it is naive, like more open to it. If you ask the average human these days, like I feel like they won't be as terrified about about aliens than they used to be even 5, 10, 20 years ago. I think it's a good thing, and I think we're going to promote that, hopefully. But with that said, I think there are two sides to extraterrestrials. To keep it really simple, there are ones that are negative and that have intentions to hurt us or not care about us, along with the ones that we think of that are trying to help us. But they're, it's good to remember, not just be completely naive and say, no, all aliens are good. I believe that they're spiritual evolved beings. They're coming here to help us. Everything else is misinformation. It's like everything is based on something. So there are still negative ETs, but I think there are positive ETs as well. It's just like everything. There's both sides to it.
Yeah, and like as a little point, just with what you just said there, it's a lot. We remove ourselves from the equation so much. It's just like that. There are the good ones and the bad ones, but we are not being, we're not remembering or taking into consideration our own sovereignty with our consciousness, as far as the state of consciousness we're in, whether we're living in love or service, or whether we're living in fear and like, hatred. By the way that we feel, we will draw in. It's like a telephone. Like, depending on how you feel, you're going to call the good aliens, you're going to call the bad aliens, and they'll come in, just if you let them in. And I think also, like with what Stephen Hawking said, it equated what would happen in the future with aliens. It would be like with the Native Americans and the colonizers coming in and just like genociding everybody. I don't know if I think that is a very true thing, in the sense of a post-traumatic stress cultural memory. Like Stephen Hawking said it in the future tense, like, okay, if they come one day, or when they come in the future, this is what they'll probably do. I don't know. I look at it in the sense like, okay, maybe the reason we have that fear is because it happened already in the past. And if you start looking into what the Anunnaki situation is in the Sumerian creation stories, or even in the Egyptian story of Septepi, with the first time, and you got all the cultures around the world talk about this time before the flood, where there were beings that were kind of like gods, or miraculous beings that could do shit that just looks mythological to us now. But there was some sort of war back then, where there was some sort of invasion and a beginning, all of the roots of slavery and war and all this stuff. I think that the ancient and alien invasion, that like Independence Day makes you want to think, like the Ronald Reagan, like, we need to band together to stop these bad aliens. I think that, like, for all intents and purposes, that invasion happened tens of thousands of years ago. And our entire history since then has been the repercussions of that. So, and there have been a lot of changes. So like back then, according to the research, it was much more common for beings like this to show up and intervene and interfere with human development. But then, according to the research, something changed, where there was a new rule was set, like, okay, we fucking like fucked with the earth enough. Let's pull back. We got to let them figure it out on their own, and it's kind of like a shitty situation to be in. But ever since then, it's like, okay, now we're alone. We're, even it's like we're on the flat earth, and like it's just, we're all, the earth is the center of the world. So everything, it's just like we're completely cut off from everything. And according to all of the ancient stories, that's not what it used to be, but we devolved into this understanding. So we're still dealing with the post-traumatic stress of these good aliens and these bad aliens. And like Stephen Greer in the Sirius documentary, he would say that, like, there are only good aliens, that, like, the concept of bad aliens is just our own, like, insecurities. And I don't know about that. I think, yes, there are bad aliens, but like I said before, it's like, it's just a matter of what kind of consciousness we have, which ones we're going to attract into the situation. So it's not as much about what's coming in the future that's scary. It's about how scary our past was that we can't remember, and we just keep reliving it over and over again.
Wow. Yeah, that's a hell of a thing to think about. And I think part of the reason we always had great conversations about this is because we come from, or at least we feel like we come from different places. Like, you were always so Atlantean based, you kind of felt like rooted there, or connected to it. And when I started learning about this stuff, I always felt rooted and connected somewhere else. So you keeping your, like, the historical perspective in mind, you always do that so well. And like, I don't even think to try to remember what happened here, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, and thinking about how that is still here. It's a ripple in the consciousness still affecting people. So it's kind of hard. It's like a dream or something you don't remember if it's going to happen or if it already happened, but you feel like it's there. So you're like saying about what Stephen Hawking said, it's like something that is going to happen that already happened. It's just like he's turned around or something, it's just like he's looking the wrong way, or he's just, a little bit off balance, like we are as a species. Yeah, so that's and it's a great metaphor for how we're feeling as a consciousness. It's great. Like if we're scared and we're feeling like extraterrestrials are one way, those are like a great metaphor you said is picking up the phone. It's like if you're scared, you're going to call the negative extraterrestrial and they're going to pick up every time, like, what's up? Like, what's his name? Pennywise. He's always going to be there, to feed on you. He's like always willing to hang out. He'll hang out anytime, so.
Float down here, George. We all float with the reptilians down here, George.
Exactly. And I feel like they're just more easily accessible, the negative ones, because they're ready for it. They're waiting for it. And whereas the positive ones are a little bit more like, no, I mean, like if you really, really want it, we're here, but we're not going to come down to you anymore. And I liked thinking about that too, is because giving them, the extraterrestrials, a human aspect is like they tried a thing and then they were like, oh shit, we're too deep into this. Like we're too involved, and it's like when two people are having a fight and you try to get in and break it up and you just make it worse. It's like sometimes you have to step back and let things happen. And it's wonderful to think and humanizing to think that the overlord, super evolved extraterrestrial civilization that was like overseeing Earth and trying to keep the peace fucked up. And they were like, oh, we need to change shit because we didn't know what we were doing or we weren't doing it well. Like, that's a cool idea for me. Yeah, it sucks because they fuck shit up. And now we're like figuring stuff out alone instead of, they could have been here the whole time. And now we're just like a kid lost in the forest. We're still being watched to make sure we don't burn down the forest, but our help kind of distance itself from us, which is why what I was talking about before, Dolores Cannon is the woman who wrote about the waves of extraterrestrials, and specifically, which is what I was drawn to, from the Pleiades. A lot of them came from, or some of them, the Pleiadian civilization was one of the groups that was kind of in charge to babysit planet Earth. So when they made this new rule to not influence until the civilization gets to a certain point.
Pull out of Vietnam, so to speak.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we still left the dark ancients in there. We still left the SEALs and the people that weren't on the payroll, and all the sneaky deaky ones, all the spies. They were all still there, but. Which is what happened here in a more positive way. It's like they found a way to circumvent the rules. And they're like, okay, well, we can't go in there as we are, but can we go in there if we forget who we are, if we reincarnate with a random people, and if we're basically 100% human except for our soul, and then we just have to hope that we wake up at some point or remember our purpose. Like all those stipulations, can we go then, and then it's just like, all right, I guess that works. You're kind of cheating, but you're not, because you're taking away so many of your tools. Like, you're leaving your tool belt behind, you're leaving your cape, you're leaving all this stuff, and you're forgetting and just hoping that there's something that's going to be there to remind you, or other people find other beings that are on the same path.
Made me think of A Scanner Darkly a little bit. Where John Arctor, or Bob Arctor, Keanu Reeves' character, he works for the government, and his whole thing is about infiltrating the drug ring. But the thing is like he has to make it look like he's a drug addict, and then he becomes a drug addict, and the drug actually makes him forget who he is, and the whole thing. That's the only way they could get into the secret facility where they're like actually growing the drugs, and it's all part of this big thing to manipulate and control people. And then it was just like really dreary, kind of fucking like, God damn it, I hope it, like at the very end, he didn't know what he was picking up the flower, like that's what he was supposed to do the whole time. But he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but it was like an unconscious thing. He put the flower in his pocket, like, like, I'm going to save this for my friends. Like, he doesn't know who his friends are. Is he going to get out of there? I don't know. Like, but it was like, that's kind of what we're doing right now. It's like, we came in here, forget, but, that's like, that's kind of the scary thing too. It's like going into this thing, like we're going to help and we're going to go in there and forget, but we become so human and entrenched in the karma of our own experiences. And I think that, at this point, it's fun. It's like being on a vacation, because if we're dealing with eternity and flying through beyond the infinite forever, basically, what's, 1,000 lifetimes on Earth? What's 10,000? What's even 1,000,000 lifetimes on Earth? That's like, in this course of eternity, that's like still nothing. So it's like kind of letting go and letting yourself be willing to forget, be willing to make mistakes, because that's where the real learning lessons come.
Yeah, I'm conflicted in that realm as well, because 1,000,000 lifetimes on Earth sounds like a long time to me. It sounds like a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work to be here, and I'm not even. I don't have a hard life at all, So I can only imagine people who have difficult lives. Just feel like being here is like, there's chains attached to you and weights. You're dragging like a whole tractor behind you. Everything you do, it's like in the dreams when you're trying to run and you feel like you're running through molasses, and that's just so much work. So 1,000 lifetimes sounds like a lot here, man. Even two, like, it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
What's that?
One seemed like it could be enough. And
right.
Yeah, and like
Exactly.
right now, it's like it's kind of like that. I think historically that's what it's been. Our entire history, even just the last couple thousand years, has been like, man, we're just running through molasses and we're trapped and we don't know who we are. We're never going to get there. And but now what seems to be different is there's something that has changed, and that's what a lot of the researchers in the UFO community talk about, like Corey Good and the secret space program stuff. Is that, like, let's just say in this situation, the reptilians or these bad or malevolent extraterrestrials have had dominance over the world for a very long time. But then something changed recently, where we've asked, enough people have asked for help in a positive way, that it's like authorized good extraterrestrials to come in and finally make some interventions. Kind of like SEAL Team 6, or like the United Nations intervening in some sort of humanitarian crisis situation. So it's like, yeah, there have been a lot of these things, but right now we have these opportunities. If we open ourselves up to it, the help is there, where maybe it hasn't been in a long time. We can make much bigger leaps now than we have before, because we're becoming more balanced within our own selves.
Agreed. And we just learning that we could ask for help was a huge step, I feel like, because we didn't realize that there was anybody else that could help us. We just felt like we're in this quicksand all together and there's no one to reach for. You're just like, fuck, I guess this is what's happening now. But then learning that there's somebody up there or a rope or something was huge. Learning it was there, and then feeling confident enough and safe enough to ask for the help or for the hand has been just a big step in itself. I think we're still adjusting to that. Like, even it kind of, The Sopranos in its own way represents that. It's like Tony realizing that he can go. It starts off with him in the office talking to his shrink, and that's like thinking about that for the mafia in the 1900s or whenever Murder Inc. was going. No one would ever think, they were so fucked up and they endured so many fucked up things, but they never could ask for help. There was nobody that could help them. But then Tony finally, whoever convinced him in the end, talking about it ended up helping him a lot, even though, he's a fucked up guy. Realizing that you can ask for help and that there is help and that the help works is a huge step. And I think that is also in part for men in general, like being less manly and being more open to talking about how they feel, and not having to be so stoic, and like letting things out and learning that that's just human and it's not necessarily linked to a sex. Both sexes can be strong, both can be weak, and both can be emotional, and it's good to get therapy. And I think as a species we need therapy, and I think we're getting that in a lot of different ways now, but only because we just started asking for it and just realizing that it was actually there.
Yeah. Like it's like the scales have tipped. Like there's always, like, in so many ways, we talked about with 2012 last time, about this shift that's been going on. We're transitioning from one realm to the next. And we've even said, talking about like service to self, service to others, and 51% this way, 54. It's like there has been some sort of shift. And let's just say, for the sake of the discussion, that there have been people, societies or organizations, whatever, that have known about the history of our Earth in a way that we don't remember. Like they have the knowledge, and it's like their duty and obligation has been to slowly integrate this knowledge, like Majestic 12 in its own 20th century version, but on a fractal level, like even going before that, there have been people that have known about this shit for a long time, and that has worked in a negative way, even though maybe it was like, we have this, you know, we have the knowledge. We can't just give them the knowledge because that'll fuck shit up again, like breaking the Prime Directive. We have to pull out of the fight, but we do have to figure out a way to communicate this knowledge. And I think over the course of thousands of years, that worked in a negative way as well, because it was like it became a clique, and it's like they're the ones with the knowledge, and then just they looked at themselves almost as above everybody else, and over time they got so detached from people that they saw themselves literally as these descendants of the beings that knew from the past as better than everyone else, but they were subject to the same rules of karma as everyone else. And that, like, being this thing where they've actually had this like organization, I want to call it the Cabal, that have been like the dominant force on Earth and in the solar system, and that's a whole other thing. It's like this, like the Empire from Star Wars, like they've been there, but recently part of this shift might be is that there's been the rebellion, there's been an alliance, there have been people that have been involved in the terrible shit, and they just couldn't do it anymore, and they wanted help, and there was no one out there to help them, but slowly they started defecting and organizing into a balance, to balance the Cabal. Like they're not, you know, the Alliance are, you know, they all did a bunch of bad shit most likely, but they decided that it's better to step out of that system and fight that system and bring balance to it. So I think that right now we're getting into that point where you could feel there's a lot of disclosures going on. There's a lot of, like, just with the internet and the technology, we're sharing and communicating in a much faster and more efficient way than we ever did. And that's really what the Cabal's whole like mission statement was in the first place. We have to figure out a way to communicate this. But suddenly the knowledge was like out of their hands, and now it's just being communicated fluently everywhere and in languages in ways that they don't even understand. And that's like, in a way, a metaphor for the Terminator thing of Skynet becoming self-aware. Except in this situation, we're the artificial intelligence. We're the artificial intelligence that they created and is getting out of control. They fear us in that way. But it's like Skynet becoming self-aware or humanity becoming self-aware is the ultimate thing here. Depending on how you look at it, from whether this is a bad thing or a good thing, that's what's, in my opinion, I think yours too. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's like bringing balance back to the planet and the consciousness.
Exactly. And that's what we were saying, is not only do we feel like it is a good thing, but it would behoove us to feel that it's a good thing. You know, if we had a choice where we could control it, which I think we can, think about it as a good thing, because then the good thing will happen without being ignorant about something. But, you know, we have to stay positive about it. I know it's very easy to get negative about stuff these days, like everything. And like in Terminator, it didn't end well, obviously, and we don't want it to end that way. And there are a lot of possibilities, and it seems like a lot of things are at the end of their fuses and the dominoes are ready to tumble, but it could go so many different ways. So I think the little edge that we have is the believing, the wanting to believe, and the thinking and feeling that it is positive, because we've gone through the negative, like you said, whether or not we remember it, whether or not it's, I mean, every day there's something terrible happening. I mean, today there was a guy somewhere in New York, I think, that ran a bunch of people over in a U-Haul, like another thing today, and then let alone the thing in Vegas less than 2 months ago, or less than a month ago, literally a month ago. So, I mean, there are bad things that are still happening, but we have to do, you know, we have to be good. That's our duty, you know, to thinking about it from that way, because I feel like maybe I'm from another place. And I think maybe I was part of that, one of those waves that came in to kind of help the planet. And I'm kind of remembering that along with other people around me that I've met and friends and just feelings that I get. So I feel like it is my job to be positive, kind of at all costs, be aware of what's happening and not promote things that are detrimental to us. even if you're remaining positive, like if all else fails. But ultimately, being as if positive things are going to happen. Like that's how I go through the world. I go through the world that it's going to work out. I don't go through the world like a bomb's going to go off any minute. Well, fuck it. It could end. I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm like, no, I'm functioning as if the world will continue through the next phase of what all the bullshit that's happening. And we're going to get through it and we're going to make it to the next step, whatever that is. And I think that is what we're here to do. We're here, like you were talking about the book, the new paradigm book. I even forgot the name of it, but the way that it spoke, it was matter of fact, and it wasn't arrogant. It wasn't like projecting its opinion. It was speaking like scientifically. This is that, and this means that, and therefore this is this, and this is how things are. It was just like that's how it is, and it was an interesting perspective. That was why it was so interesting to read, is because of the perspective that it was written from. It didn't seem very terrestrial, which was, we either made up or it really did feel that way. And I think that if people like us or whoever feels this way, living that way and being that way, like, oh yeah, this is true and that is true, and that's how these things are, that's the best promotion we can have for it, instead of going out, with posters on the corner or whatever it is, or yelling or throwing rocks or having a long Facebook status, whatever. Like the best thing you could do is be towards what the reality you think is happening and manifesting, because there's a lot going on right now, and it really could go a lot of different ways with aliens as well. Like I think that's going to be the big theme of the next, whenever we get through our Trump stuff. I feel like the extraterrestrial aspect is going to come to the front one way or another in the next 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully within my lifetime. But I think that's going to be a huge thing, and partially because of what Reagan was talking about in his Star Wars speech, is like, imagine that threat and how uniting that would be. That if something from out there came towards us, we'd all of a sudden be like, oh, I don't care if you're Jewish or you're Islamic or you're black or you're white or you're male or you're female. We're all humans on this planet, and everything that you have and I have is under threat right now. So therefore we're the same. All the other problems out the window, because we're both facing the same threat. So I don't think it's going to happen in a negative way like that, but I think it will be unifying, discovering about extraterrestrials, hopefully them coming here positively whenever we're ready for it. But I think that's why I'm so interested in it, and that's why I feel like I'm part of that idea, and that promotion of that idea is that it's positive. And I think it's going to be very jarring. And like you said, with the Orson Welles War of the Worlds way back when, that was a test. And I don't know if you remember that like video broadcast by like Vermillion, I think it was in the 70s. It was like it overtook, I don't know what part, it was in the United States, but it overtook a broadcast. And it was like, you can look it up on YouTube. I think it's, the name of the being is Virilin or Virilmin or whatever, something like that. But it just kind of overtakes a broadcast in the 70s. So obviously a lot more difficult to do than today, I would imagine. And spoke like, this is Virilin, all these things are happening. We are from a different planet or different star system, and your world is going through changes and blah, 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 blah. Like a statement that an alien civilization would make to Earth in the late 70s. So, and I feel like that was another test, and people freaked out about that. But I feel like we're getting better and better at our tests. We started with a hard fail with War of the Worlds, like a hard fail. Like that, there were no images. That was just like people hearing stuff on the radio and literally thinking the world is ending. And then, kind of evolving from there, and then getting movies and new images and new ideas, and then people who are into, more and more people in the mainstream have talked about aliens, whether or not they thought it was crazy or not. And Tom DeLonge, who was just on Joe Rogan, kind of went a little out there. He sounded like you and I in 2007 a little bit too much.
Oh yeah, well I can't talk about that.
But
yeah, it's really great. But, oh yeah, but I can't tell you. What is it? Well, I can't tell you.
Yeah, he was like a kid, like we were kids. And when you're about it, you get so excited when you hear about something that you think other people don't know about it, and you feel proud that you know about it, and you feel like the same reason that you want to start a club with information that other people don't have. It's like that. There's an enticing thing about that. Like I remember we even joked about that a couple of times. And then we were like, yeah, we should start our own like secret group and have information. And we're like, oh fuck, no, that's how it started. That was like no, we don't want it. It's exactly what we don't want to do. But we felt that craving for it. Like, that's really cool. And I want to be in the know, and I want to be around people who know, and I want to know that other people don't know what I know, because it makes me feel good about myself. But we have to let all that selfishness of knowing go. And I think the most recent big movie dealing with extraterrestrials is the Arrival. I don't think it was The Arrival, but like that was just communication based. Like that was literally all about communicating. So that idea is great to me. Like Avatar was great, but it was still the same movie over and over. You know, it's the most generic cliche plot there was. Everything was just flip flop. And then moving on from that, it was like Arrival, the beings literally couldn't have been much more different than we are, at least physically. Like they didn't speak a language. They didn't look humanoid. We couldn't even really tell what they were. They looked like squids that they were huge, but we learned how to communicate with them. And I felt like that was a huge, huge step in just our consciousness and what we're ready for as far as dealing with things like aliens. Is like, not only are we beyond like accepting that they might exist because we don't really have any proof, but if they do exist, we're willing to communicate. That was like us saying we're open to it now, instead of being like, oh my God, you're going to kill me and eat me and burn me and shoot my whole planet up. Now we're like, okay, you're different, but I kind of want to, now I'm really curious. I feel like we're more curious than we've ever been now, because we can be.
And the fact that communication was their gift, the thing that it was all about. Like, it wasn't, there's like that show, V, you know, that came out with they come down and they're like, we want to help you. The aliens are here to give us the tools that are going to help us get out of the shitstorm that we're in. We're going to give you free energy. We're going to give you the healing technology. We'll give you all this stuff. But really, and like Arrival was so cool, it was something like as mundane seemingly as communication. It's just like, here's a new way to communicate with each other. And that whole concept of establishing communication in order for things to happen, that's what it's all about. Like in Psyche too, that's what, like in order to do a Psyche balance, first, you need to establish communication. You need to create a clear understanding of what yes and what no means in your own language for yourself. So like the alien in that situation would be the Psyche facilitator who comes in and like helps you like figure out what's good for you without imposing what they think is good for you, as hard as that may be at times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the foundation for any friendship or relationship, right? Is establishing communication. Like that's kind of what, when you go out on dates with people, that's what the first couple of times you're meeting are about, is like trying to form a connection and a line of communication. Because if you can't, then everything just feels awkward. That's what those, like, you say something that you think is going to connect and it doesn't connect. So you're like, oh, this feels weird. And then like just a kind of a domino effect. But if you can establish communication, and if you can talk to somebody and find things in common, that's where you go down all the paths of like, oh, okay, and maybe it doesn't work out, but we found a line of communication here. And that is so big to do with anything that you're trying to understand or at least interact with. So I just love that idea of Arrival, because I really didn't know what it was about besides extraterrestrials or aliens invading or whatever the story was. But thinking about like established communication, and then with balancing too, it's perfect, and it's great. And I think we're trying to do that in every other aspect of Earth life too, like opening up more dialogues, you know, and not just having like blunt statements like, no, we won't talk to them. We won't talk to them no matter what the situation is. We refuse to communicate with them. It's like, that's never going to solve anything, because if you don't know what the other person is doing, if you can't understand the other person, it's not going to end well for at least one of you, and probably both of you. So
it's funny too, in Arrival, you got the synchronicity of Lois Lane being the main facilitator of the communication. So you've got Lois Lane, who was in Superman, who's a journalist, who's communicating between Superman.
You said Superman?
You know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, you know, and it's funny too, because I was like in this episode of the show, Ancient Civilizations, I was telling you, which for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, it's like Ancient Aliens, except in my opinion, a lot better, because it's not as much about the alien stuff. You know, ironically, this conversation's about aliens, but there was an episode in the show where they talk about the Tower of Babel. And that is like the first, that's the most iconic event in the history of the traditions around the world that spoke of, before this point, humans spoke one language and they could all communicate with each other, and they wanted to achieve and build this tower to reach the heavens. So that could be interpreted in a number of ways. One was that they were creating a spaceport to basically leave the planet, because there were the Anunnaki, or the Elohim, the ones from heaven that had like a monopoly on spaceports, and like they were the only ones that could leave and go to and from. But then the Tower of Babel was like this effort by some of the Elohim or Anunnaki that wanted to bring humankind up to the level of the gods and not look at them as below the gods. They wanted to see humankind and the supposed gods, or the Anunnaki, as the same beings. And this resulted in a huge clash where we look at this as a bad thing, like it's interpreted a lot as a bad thing, that the Tower of Babel was just like humans being arrogant and thinking that they know so much, and they were just going to make a tower like a big dick, like oh, we're going to make the biggest dick on the earth ever. And then God comes in and says, no, you guys are getting too cocky down there. So like, I'm going to knock down your tower. And that's like the image of the tower in the tarot cards. And it's the most, like, people think of the devil or the death card as really bad or scary in the tarot. I would say that the tower is actually, like, if you get that card, then fucking watch out, because everything you think you know is going to fall apart. And that's a scary card. But it's the other way of looking at it, was that it wasn't like humankind was just getting cocky and arrogant. It was like an anarchist society. Like, if you want to look at it this way, the Garden of Eden was more like a concentration camp where they were slaves. Like, they were slaves to the Elohim, or they were slaves to this Lord or this great administrator over the land. And there was all of the humans leaving and creating their own human-based civilization. And the Tower of Babel was like the center of that. So this was like the first time humankind were all speaking one language, operating from the same feeling, the same intention, and building a society that had nothing to do with war, that had nothing to do with violence. It was literally just about like building up what humanity can be without the interference of something outside of it. It was just like, let's do our own thing. And they were doing it right. But then in the story, then you got, not the good guy comes in, but knocks down the tower and is like, no, we don't want humans to, we want them to look up to us still. We'd rather them just like, if they want to get to the heavens, they got to come through us first. We want them to come to our airport. We don't want them to build their own airport. So it knocked them down. And then the final part of that story was that the Elohim separated humans around the world and confused their languages. And that, I think, was the kind of foundation, like, event that led to this whole situation now where, well, not right now, but leading up to now, where communication has been like our biggest downfall. We don't know how, it's like we talk to each other, we don't know what we're saying, and it just kind of keeps misleading us, and we keep going around not knowing what the fuck we're talking about. But it's like, now I think we're coming back to that point now. Like, regardless of whatever it is, it's like we're building this tower again. Maybe it's not an actual physical tower, but it's more just like our own. It's like we're learning to communicate with ourselves without having to take the story out there is going to define me. The priest is going to tell me what I know about myself, or the scientist is going to tell me what I know about myself. People are learning to fucking go away from either one of those and make the story up themselves. And that's helping them tap into this whole thing about what being alive is all about. It's like, no, I don't need these alien influences in my life. I can do this myself. So it's like, it's funny. Again, it's like one of those examples of how in the past there was something that motivated or spawned this whole fucking situation in the first place.
Right. And I was having the same thought when you were saying that. It's like, it's coming back to the point where everybody's speaking the same language. I mean, English is becoming the international language, basically. I mean, as far as I know, Mandarin, Chinese, and English are the two most popular languages on the earth. And one will eventually win out. I really hope it's English, because that's the one that I speak, and it'd be very convenient for me if everybody spoke English. But I feel like now has got to be the most time in history ever that this many people have spoken one language. I mean, there's almost 7 billion of us now, and who knows how many of those people, like billions of people, speak English, which is incredible, you know? So, I mean, that alone is saying that we're slowly getting on the same page. Again, like I'm going to England, obviously where the English language came from, but there's going to be a lot of people from a lot of different places, hopefully, that I interact with in England that still speak English. So I'll be able to speak to somebody from maybe somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Spain or somewhere in Russia or wherever, and we'll still be able to understand each other, at least on a basic level, which is amazing. You know, I mean, that's just learning about where other people came from and learning how similar they are to you and not alien to you. Then that's a huge step in the right direction. And I feel like it's only a matter of time before everybody can communicate on the same level, same language. And then from where we go from there, I think is we can build our own tower, or we can build whatever we want, or we can build our own airport. But as soon as we become all the cells in the organism can communicate with each other independently, we don't need other cells to translate, then I think that is where the organism becomes the one organism, and we can start doing things bigger than the one cell, because we'll be on the same level and we'll understand each other. And I think hopefully it'll go beyond language and beyond, you know, English, at least. You know, if you hear the idea of telepathy, like evolved aliens use telepathy to communicate because it's simpler, and obviously words get in the way. Like if I wanted to just communicate what I was saying here, it would take a quarter of a second rather than me rambling on for 5 minutes. But that's kind of the nuances of being a human, is like dragging everything out and saying too many words and like and this and that. But that's kind of where we are right now. But I think we are, like, with slang and evolution of language, it's getting simpler. Like if you watch The Wire, the guys in the hood in Baltimore are speaking almost a different language, but it's more efficient and it's simpler and it's more excitable, and you can understand more from simpler things than you can from long drawn out things. So language is evolving while everybody is learning the same language. It'll take a while for everyone to catch up with each other, but I think it's a huge step in communication. And then, like I said, as soon as we all realize that we're on the same level and we speak the same language, specifically or not, then that's maybe when the extraterrestrials can come down and speak to us as one, instead of like a convoluted, everybody's on different pages. You know, it's like if you can come down and have one language that everybody understands, not necessarily specifically one language, but one thing that everybody can understand because they're all within the same realm of vibrations or understanding, that'd be more convenient for extraterrestrial intervention and also just communicating with other civilizations. We'd be more willing to understand them, and they'd be more capable of understanding us. But like you always said, it's like it comes down to communicating with yourself. It's like learning about what you're saying to yourself and what your body is saying and what your soul is saying, and listening to yourself. It's like, instead of just talking like I've been doing for forever, like start listening more and understanding, truly understanding things, and not just waiting to spew some nonsense that you saw on Facebook or whatever it is. But it's happening slowly and annoyingly, but it is happening, definitely. And it's exciting.
It is, man. It's it's like that magic word. We're looking for that abracadabra that literally just changes everything. And that's like a magic word, you know, like pull a rabbit out of the hat, you know. But back to like the pagan or the nature tradition based people that understood the power of vibration, and just by doing an incantation, by saying, like, even the Tibetan Buddhists that do the chanting, that get into that really crazy like vibration sound, and doing that repetitively enough, even Native American, all the indigenous like songs, basically, they weren't just singing to entertain each other. They were getting into a very serious state of prayer, and then the words would communicate. The words are symbols, and depending on how coherent the word is with your intention, that intention can communicate a lot faster, like electricity. It's like having a much more solid or conductive material to go from one form to the next. So it's like finding that magic word to be able to literally say abracadabra and the vibration of that word with the intention will resonate with the object that you're focusing on and can literally lift something off the ground. People wonder about how the pyramids were built, whether it was alien technology or whatever it was, but there's even thoughts or theories about how it was all a vibrational energy type of technology, that using some sort of thing to amplify our thoughts, like the vibration will literally levitate a rock. So, you know, because there's a very serious disconnect between our own thoughts and what actually comes out of our mouths today. I don't think it was always like that. I think there might have been a time a long time ago, and most likely throughout hidden its own areas, that the people that are wizards are the ones that have a strong coherence in what's going on in here and how it gets communicated out there in the most simple way. And it appears like magic, but really it's just vibration and changing that. So it could all change in a matter of like a word. Like you say a word and boom, it spontaneously changes. And I was talking with a friend the other day about artificial intelligence and like the future of humanity and what looks so scary, and it definitely doesn't look hopeful. And, you know, he was taking more of the cynical side and I was taking like a optimistic side. And one of the things for me that helps me be optimistic is letting go of any expectation or limitation or thinking about what time is all about in general. It's like when it's like, okay, well, in my thinking, a long time in the grand scheme of things is not really a long time. So it's like letting go, and it's not always easy to do, but like letting go and removing yourself from the situation enough that, yeah, maybe I won't be around physically as Alex Lipton when this happens, but I know that my spirit's eternal in such a way that I'll still be here. It's not like you just disappear. So it's like that's, and by taking that stance of letting go of time and seeing it all happening right now, being that optimistic person in a situation like that, ultimately the goal for me to be optimistic is not just to impose my view on somebody, but is more to just like, in the face of somebody who's being cynical or pessimistic, is to just kind of like help them relax a little bit, help them relax and maybe, you know, not feel so bad. And I think if more people started to do that, then the vibrations start to change. You know, whether or not what's going to happen or what's not going to happen, if we felt a little bit less tension about what the hell's going on right now, that might help us see a little bit more clearly. It's like driving down the road and the music is blasting and you got people yelling in the back, someone's drunk, like, you know, you got the cell phone out, and there's like holograms and self-driving cars and everything's like all over the fucking place. If we could just kind of like, okay, just like, okay, turn the music down. Okay, like I'm gonna put the cell phone down, like, okay, everyone be quiet for a second. It's like it reduced the stimuli, you can see what's happening, it's not as intense. So it's like I think with, you know, it's like with the whole alien thing, it's really like taking that, you know, it's like we want to believe, and it's a touch and go thing. Like I want to believe, but also like I trust that, you know, that there's an unfolding process, like you said before, like knowing everything's gonna work out in its own time. And maybe something doesn't seem like it works out right now, but there's a reason even behind that. And that's just another challenge to become present with the situation. I think that's what, if there's been, you know, benevolent extraterrestrials or benevolent interdimensional beings, that's what they really want us to start doing more, is learning how to be present, not be looking so much into what's coming in the future or harping too much on what the past was about. Yes, those are important, but coming more into the present moment. And that's like where we can see what's right in front of our faces right now. And that's another thing about the aliens. They say it's like, yeah, you look up at the sky, it looks like a big blue empty sky, but really there's fucking UFOs everywhere all the time. But we just don't have the programming to like even process that, to see that, because it would cause too many ripple effects. Like the Native Americans that would look out over the horizon and they literally couldn't see the colonizer ships coming out of the horizon because it was so foreign to them. They didn't see it. So it's like we're living from programs. And if we were to, you know, learn to communicate with ourselves better, learn to communicate with nature better, that all helps us become more present and see what's already there. It's not about what's coming or what happened in the past. It's just, yeah, it's all here right now.
Yeah. And there are so many distractions in everyday life, and it's so easy to lose sight of things and to get too involved in what's happening in everywhere else around you, rather than thinking, like seeing what's happening like right in front of you. And a lot of people just get so worked up, especially like at a place where I work. It's a high pace like restaurant, and it's just really easy to get overwhelmed by seeing all the movement and all these things that are happening. But really, it's just when it comes down to it, you can realize that there are a lot of things that are big deals and that are life impacting situations, but most of the things that you go through in your daily life that kind of work you up are really not that big of a deal. And if you could like take a breath and kind of calm down, and then you just kind of like look around you and you can actually see what's happening around you and have perspective on life. It's a lot easier to deal with something if you don't have what happened an hour ago and what's going to happen tomorrow all weighted on you at the same time. It's like, no, just be this. Obviously be aware that there are things that have happened and that there are things that are going to happen, but to just take in the moment and just calm the fuck down. I feel like that's the big theme. Just chill out. Like if people could just see a little more clearly, put on some glasses and just chill the fuck out, or maybe put on some sunglasses. I don't know, but just take a moment, and take a breath and chill out. Yeah, it's pretty fucking crazy all the time, but let it be crazy all the time later. Have a time to yourself, listen to yourself think, listen to yourself breathe. And I feel like a lot of people have been neglecting themselves in that way. I know I do. It's hard for me to live right in the moment, even right now, but it's not hard to do, for 1 second, one day. And it really is valuable to kind of just tone it down and look around and then let yourself see things that you don't normally see. Like you're saying, if, there's too many things going on and we can't see with all the extraterrestrials or all the ships that are in the sky because we're operating on a different plane. Not saying if you just stop and be still for a couple of moments, you'll be able to see anything, but I feel like collectively, if we start doing that, like we've been on the move for so long and we don't stop, and we're on our phone, and then we're on our computer, and then we're at work, and then we're in our car, and then we're getting food, and it's just like it never stops. So it's that the tornado inside of you is just going, and it's hard for you to focus on anything. So if you start, chilling out a little bit and just stopping for a little bit, like we talk about doing not being, being instead of doing, that's a huge step. And that allows you time to communicate with people and form a dialogue. If you're just running around thinking about aliens and not stopping, then it's fucking scary. But if you sit down and underneath a tree and with your dog and look at the sunset or whatever, then things make a little bit more sense, and they're not as scary. You're like, you know what, if a UFO did come right now, it would be okay. It wouldn't be so crazy. But if you're running around and you're in a 60-hour work week, and then you're like, oh my God, if an alien was here right now, it'd just fucking throw me over the edge. I wouldn't be able to fucking handle this shit. I'd ride off the highway. It's just, you can't really handle anything. You can't take anything in stride if you're sprinting the whole time. You got to kind of slow down and at least jog. We're not good at that.
No, definitely not. Working on it.
Working on it, definitely. Yeah. We're slowing down a little bit, but still speeding up too.
Yeah. It's, I think, a good place to maybe kind of start to bring a wrap to this and bring a synopsis and summary of everything. It's like, ultimately, we are receivers of energy, receivers of all sorts of stuff, ideas, and the cup or the vessel in which we're receiving is undergoing a major transformation of how we're receiving things. And, whether it's like we're receiving too much and we're not receiving enough, or we're receiving different things. It's like if we adjust the TV, so to speak, so we can pick up different signals. The TV is going through a massive maintenance to pick up new signals right now. Some would even say there's like new things like a satellite coming in so we can pick up all new signals altogether. So it's like, again, this whole thing with aliens, it's first recognize that it's like we're going through this change in the way we're receiving things, and without looking at too much about what we're actually receiving, I'm expecting to receive this about aliens. Like, just it's everything that you could possibly think. But it's not completely foreign or as alien, ironically, as what we've thought when we think the word alien. It's more like as completely natural as your day-to-day life when you've got your dog or you're walking down the street and there's like squirrels running down the sidewalk, or there's plants even, it's like everything is alive and there's an interaction with it. And the concept of aliens, it's like, well, there's a diversity of alien life, just like there's a diversity of plant life, and everything is different. So it's about just, I think the thing, it's like accepting, making the leap. Yes, okay, it's not about deciding whether they do or do not exist. I think it's like, okay, the shift in the receiver, changing the receiver, saying, okay, yes, they do exist. Taking the leap, okay, yes, they do exist. Now that they do exist, what kind of existence is it? Because it's not just as simple as the thinking that like alien, self, not self, foreign, not foreign, black, white, man, woman. It's like, no, it's more diverse than that. So once we let go of the primitive thinking that it's just something as black and white as that, then we can start to, then maybe we'll start, the communication can start opening up, because, like the prime directive and these benevolent beings, the good ones don't necessarily want to interfere and confuse the situation anymore. They would allow us, it would make more sense for us to just kind of like make mistakes and learn that our own selves without being meddled with in such a negative way.
Exactly. And maybe we're need to be meddled with because there are other things going on that we can't understand. So that's why there's pressure for them to interfere, is because there's a different element out there that we're unaware of. But yeah, the communication, and you made me think of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because I've been trying to bring up music too, because of the evolution of music and just the sounds and the communication. But like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they kind of establish communication through those boo, 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 like those tones. And I think that's also kind of what's happening too. It's part of the melding of communication understanding, is that our music is evolving to a point, like specifically Bjork has a song called All Neon Like, where it's basically talking about asking for help because they're there, and like a lot of things that we've talked about. But that kind of energy in music like Bjork, and music just that's different than, like, it's beyond language. I mean, it's beyond English, it's beyond what we speak. And I think that's also a representation of how we're feeling about things is in our communication, because that is a language in itself, music. And we're getting to a point where it is evolving to such a point where I really feel like it's going to become communication, or at least represent understanding, or it's like storytelling, or giving out information without telling somebody a story or telling somebody a thing or showing them an article. It's a form of communication. And I think where the music, if we can keep going on the level that we're going on, I think it'll be good to help us evolve and become one thing. Obviously, I can enjoy a Chinese song with some language that that I can't understand at all, but I still understand the feelings of it, and I feel like that is transcendental of everything. So I think we're getting a lot closer, and I think the representations of that are everywhere, and the signs are everywhere. But we have a little bit of ways to go, and I think as long as we keep doing what we're doing and not being so aggressive about the ideas that we feel and the opinions that we have, and just kind of being how we are and remaining positive, I think it's a good way to go about it. But also, I think just the idea of aliens is so, at least to me at this point, it's kind of cool and it's exciting. So it's kind of like, it's kind of having that out there kind of spices up life a little bit, especially if you get too deep into it. So to think about aliens in a way where it's fun and exciting instead of scary and, just making things not better for you, then that we need to get through that. But I think aliens could be a good thing for us, a good idea for us, and an exciting thing for us going forward, and kind of like a catapult to figuring ourselves out, and also preparing ourselves possibly if there are aliens that exist and they want to come actually physically talk to us. So hopefully that's going to happen in, I think Bashar said between 2025 and 2030 or something. 2032, I think, is supposed to be the first open contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. So I'm hopeful about that, but that obviously is a completely fucking ridiculous thing to say. So we'll see what happens, but I always love talking about this kind of stuff. It definitely gets my juices flowing. So I'm glad we could talk about it today, and hopefully we weren't too out there for people. But I think it's a fun thing to think about. It should be a positive thing for people rather than a negative thing. So
Absolutely.
hopefully that gets out there.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like the aliens thing. It's like, yes, it's very inclusive. It's not alien is alien as much as we're alien to ourselves. And when we start knowing ourselves better, we'll be able to know beyond this concept of alien life and everything. And then it always ties back into the good and the bad. So that's whatever's good and bad out there is just as much as what's good and bad in here. So until we come to terms with all that, that will most likely determine how things unfold. And yes, it is fun to anticipate certain dates when things will happen, and regardless of which date it will be, like for the sake of the next 100 years, I'm sure it will happen. I mean, I think it has happened a long time, and I think we're seeing the effects of that information coming out now. So we'll see who gets to tell the story first, us or them.
Exactly. Hopefully both of us at the same time.
Yes, I like that. Awesome, brother. Well, yes, thanks again, everybody, for listening, and love to get your feedback and maybe get some aliens on the show. Get some of our fellow Facebook aliens on the show.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. We'll probably talk about this again sometime, but Halloween was a good time to talk about it. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day. I know your crew probably needs you back there, so I appreciate
all
you.
out partying right now, apparently. It's on autopilot, so I'm going to head to the ready room and take my pants off. But yes, John.
No pants, no problem.
No pants, no problem. No pants, no problem. It's the motto of Starfleet. But yeah, Superman, Sky Chairman of what was it? Just Sky Chairman of the world.
Thanks, man. I'll see you later. I appreciate you having me on.